Hello everyone, Caleb here. Welcome back to Roblox Studio Explain. In today's video, we're going to go over models, which are a great tool for different organizational purposes and whatnot in Roblox Studio. And so, an example of a model, let's say I select the spawn location, and I could right-click, and right here is a button to group it as a model. I could click that, and it creates a model with the spawn location inside of it. If I were to get a part, I could drag the part inside the model, select the model, and both of them would be selected. If I were to just grab one and move it, they move together as well. Models are pretty simple, but one of the best things for organization and resizing and collaboration and a lot of different things in Roblox Studio when it comes to dealing with your game objects and different assets that you have. So for an example of a model, you can look at something like this. This is a model I just pulled out the toolbox at random. It's just a small house that has this patch of grass and some windows and, of course, four walls and a simple enough roof. Now, if I select this house, we can see that it moves as one. And if I were to resize it or rotate it or anything like that, it's all one part, essentially, as it would be considered in my game window. But if I go to the Explorer over here, we can see that this retro toy house actually has two meshes and a bunch of different parts inside of it. That's because a model in Roblox Studio is a collection of parts and meshes and scripts, and really any object that you can put into your game can be a part of a model to essentially just have them grouped together. So think of it like a folder that would hold files on your computer, but instead of holding files, it holds different game objects and contains them in the same place. So if I move this model, much like I move a folder on my desktop, it moves everything within it. We can see these two meshes and all of these parts that make the rest of the house. It's really useful because instead of moving each part of this house individually, so for example, if it was ungrouped, and I would have to move each individual part of the house, and I would easily screw it up doing so. And I could drag it and try to move it this way, just with the move tool, but you can see we can really easily miss different parts of our model, like there I missed that window, the floor of the house, and the grass of it, when I was just dragging it. Whereas if I select them all, except for the base plate, of course, if I select the house and group the house as a model, and then I just name the model house, for example, then I can move the house all at once, and it makes it really simple and really straightforward. And so, why would you use models? I mean, it's for organization, as I've already talked about. It keeps things very nice and organized. You see that this is the house, and everything in here is part of that house. Anything not in here is not part of this specific house. I could have two houses, and I could have them be, I don't know, house 1 and house 2, or house and house 1, whatever way. And now everything in here is part of house 1, and nothing but house 1, and everything in here is part of our regular house, and nothing but that. And so they're very good for organization, especially when you're dealing with a lot of repeated game assets. Additionally, as you just saw me duplicate that house, when you have one model, I can press Control D to duplicate this house as many times as I want to, really. And every time I duplicate it, it will be exactly the same, with all the same scripts and behavior and everything. If I had a script in here with a door, that when the player approached the door, they could press E to open the door, I could make a pretty simple script to do that, and I could duplicate the house, and every single time, that script would be with the house as well. So every door, you just walk up to and press E to open. It's very simple, very straightforward, and it's a great thing for organizational purposes and repeated use. Also, collaboration. If you're collaborating with people, like a big team especially, then you can clearly define what goes where, as the parts of this house aren't the parts of this house, and we can see that in our Explorer because this is a house model, and this is a house model, but they're separate game objects still, and they're not intermingled and mixed together, if that makes sense, so we don't have to sift through them every single time. So models overall sound great, right? But to practically use them, you might be wondering, well, how do I do that? It's pretty easy and very straightforward. If I have a batch of parts right here, let's just say I have these three parts. and I want these three parts to be a model. I can drag my cursor over all three of them, or just select all three of them in my Explorer, right-click, and press Group as Model right here. Or a simpler way is I can select all of them either in the game window or in the Explorer and press Control and G, and it will group them as a model automatically. It's a really cool hotkey to have, and it's very easy and straightforward to do. And you'll see that Roblox Studio already names it just the moment we make it into a model. It just names it model with a capital M. That's just because it's the class name of what this object is. It's model. It's nothing else, and the game will refer to it as a model internally anytime it refers to them. But what you should do for good practice and organization is you can see if I had 100 of these and they were all named model, now I don't know which one of these groups of three blocks is which. Sure, I can hover over them and I can see in the Explorer on the right, it highlights which one I'm hovering over, but that's really painstaking when I'm looking for one specific one and only that one. And sure, I could just click to select it, but it's still just really confusing to look at in the Explorer if I'm not there with my camera right when I need to get to it. That's why it's very important that you need to name your models something that will make sense. So I'll just say a group of three parts, and that this model is nothing more and nothing less than a group of three parts. And so are all these, but for the sake of example, let's just say I want to separate these models. Recall that originally both of these are named model. I have a group of three parts, and I have, let's just say that this is the spawn location. So I'll just say this is the spawn. This is where the player would spawn in and start the game, and I would have this really fancy and decorated and all of that, and this is my group of three parts. So these are still separate, and even if I'm not looking at them or even close to them in the game window, I can say, okay, this is my spawn location in it, and this is my group of three parts, and here's the three parts within it. It makes it much simpler and much more straightforward to organize your game, even just from the Explorer window, because it would be really annoying to have to manually move over to the spawn every time, click on it, and then figure out what's wrong with it, or do what you're trying to do with it. As I kind of hinted at earlier when talking about the houses, models can also contain scripts. So, for example, let's just say I wanted this group of three parts to print anytime any of the three parts in this model was touched. To do that, I would simply insert a script and write local model equals script.parent, which is a model, and then local parts equals model get children, and this will return a table of all of the parts that are a child of the model. So in this case, it would return the script itself, which is a child of the model, and all three of the parts. To prevent it from returning the script, a very simple solution is we can move the script into one of the parts, but the more proper way to do it from the script is to just wait a second so that it can run this code right here just to get the children of the model, and then if parts, no, sorry, we do for index variable in pairs parts do, and then if b, which is the variable that we have, is a script, then we're going to remove it from the table. We would say table dot remove parts, and then the index, that's what this I is here, the place in the table that the script is. I'm not going to explain for loops right now because they're a bit more complicated than this, but all you need to know is that this bit of code right here essentially just removes the script from the table of parts that we're making. And then I'm going to say, if it's not a script, I'm going, nope, if it's not a script, and if it is a base part, and a base part is simply what these parts in Roblox Studio are referred to internally as a base part, then I'm going to say that when it is touched, it's going to have a function connected to it, and it's simply going to print I was touched with an exclamation point at the end. And now, if I were to play test the game and just touch one of these parts, I need to open the output first, which we can find right here. And I touch one of these parts, we can see that it says I was touched. And it says it a bunch because we didn't put any cooldown of any kind on it. But we can see that every single part in that model says I was touched. Because the script can read only the parts in this model and tell the game when one of them was touched or picked up if it was a tool and so on and so forth, or all the different behaviors you could ever want. The big thing about scripts and models is that scripts will still work even when you're duplicating the model that they're in. So if I press Control D to duplicate the model, I now have two groups of 3 parts. If I were to look into this one, our script would still be here exactly as we wrote it just a moment ago. The script will work exactly the same way because it has exactly the same code. And so when we duplicate models, they can also duplicate the scripts within them. This is very simple and very straightforward and a great way to make really big structures that are fully functional every time you use them. Roblox also offers a lot of pre-made models, either by themselves or other players, that you can access by coming up here to your Home tab and clicking on the toolbox. And when you open the toolbox, you'll have all of these models. You can look at models you've uploaded and a bunch of different models that everybody else in the game, or Roblox themselves even, have made. You can see that there's things like zombies and maps and monsters, and even scripts are in the toolbox as well. It's a very great way to get models for your game. Only recommendation I have if you get models from the toolbox is that you make sure if they have any scripts that they're not malicious, as some models sadly are. However, generally speaking, you should be okay to use models from the toolbox. Just make sure that they're safe to do so. Also, for models, when you're using them for organizational purposes, you can nest them inside other models. So I have all of these house models, but that takes up a lot of room in our Explorer. So I can press Control G again, and now I have a model of all of our house models. And I can rename this to Neighborhood. And now I have a neighborhood model that has all of our house models, that has all the parts that make up each house individually. This is really great when you get to really complex and games with big maps to really reduce the strain that you have when you're trying to find only a certain part of that map. Much in the same way, I could select our 2 groups of 3 parts and press Control G, select them, press Control G, and I can have parts. And in this part is both of the 3-part groups we have that we made before. And this is very simple, very straightforward, and it's called nesting models. And it's very great for organization when you're dealing with really large games. That's about it when it comes to models in Roblox Studio. You can anchor and unanchor the entire model as well, just by clicking on this button. If it's shaded, the entire model is anchored. And if it's not, the entire model is unanchored and it would fall apart if we could playtest the game. It's also a really cool trick when you're dealing with static objects to just be able to make it all a model and anchor it immediately, and then you're good to go. So again, make sure you name your models exactly what they contain for organizational purposes. Keep them organized in your Explorer, that way you don't have to sift through a bunch of junk every time you're trying to find one specific thing. And avoid making them too large or too complex, but simply because it can affect your game performance at times. And as I said, you can nest models inside other models for organizational purposes. That's about all for this video. If you enjoyed it, I hope that you'll consider leaving a like and subscribing. But with that said, I'll see you next time.